it both racist and ableist. It's just like 2007. What the fuck was going on? What's up, everyone? My name is Kelsey. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about all the books I read in July. So total I read 10 books, 5 young adult, 5 adult, 1 1-star book, 1 2-star book, 2 3-star books, 5 4-star books, and 1 5-star book. 5 fantasy, 2 contemporary, and 3 sci-fi. So it's quite a mixed month. The first book I read in July was Witchmark by C.L. Polk. This is an adult fantasy that I picked up at the library. It follows, let's see, I barely remember the plot of this book. So it follows our main character, Miles. He works at, this is set in like an alternate history, kind of like steampunky Elizabethan kind of vibe. And Miles, I don't know, there's like these magic people called storm singers that are like a secret from the rest of society that control the weather. And then there are these other magic people that aren't quite as strong as storm singers that get bound to storm singers so that they can use their magical powers to be stronger. And Miles is one of those less strong people, but he doesn't want to be bound to someone, so he runs away from home, ends up in this war, and he comes home from the war, and he has like a special talent for healing people, so he's working at a veteran hospital, but he can't let anyone know he can heal people because he'll be sent to like witch jail. Then one day, this random guy he's never met before comes into his hospital, I think, looking for him after he's been poisoned, and he says he's been poisoned, and Miles has to try and figure out who he is and where he came from, all with the help of some other magical guy who I don't really understand. So pros for this book are that Miles was like a super soft male main character, and he was just really sweet, so I enjoyed that. It's definitely a unique magic system, and the descriptions of the magic were really interesting. And then also there's a romance between 2 male characters, Miles and this other magic guy whose name I can't remember, and it was like a sweet romance, like kind of a slow build. My cons for this book are that it was hella boring. Like, so boring. I think it was only like 300 pages long, but it took me days and days to read it just because the plot was so slow and like everything was getting revealed so slowly that my interest kept like falling out of the story. There's also, the main character has a sister who's a storm singer, and he was very like dedicated to keeping her safe, and I did not understand why at all because it didn't seem like they were that close. So really his only motivation for his feelings was the fact that they were blood related. Thought it was weird. So I only ended up giving this 2 stars. It's disappointing. My second read was Going Off Script by Jen Wilde. This is a young adult's contemporary romance. I also read this. I also got this from the library. It follows our main character, Bex, who is from a very small town, but she gets an internship at this film studio that records her favorite TV show. So she's interning in the writing room of her favorite TV show, and she's very excited about it, but it turns out it's not what she's expecting. She's pretty much a coffee bitch, and the head writer is a huge asshole, and we find out pretty quickly that he's also lazy. So there's an episode he was supposed to write that Bex writes like a spec script, like this is what could happen kind of deal, and the head writer steals her script. Bex is also a lesbian, and in this script she set up 2 characters to be love interests for each other, 2 women, and the head writer changes it so that it's a male-female. One of the characters in the script is also a girl named Skottie, who's like an Instagram influencer, and there's sort of a romance between the 2 of them as well. None of that is spoilers, it's like the plot setup. So pros for this book are that Bex was a super interesting main character, and she has like really big goals, and she's always talking about and thinking about how she can achieve those goals. But also there's like some realistic struggle with self-confidence and her actual abilities. There's also a great relationship between her and her cousin, who were really close when they were growing up because they both lived in poverty, and they actually lived in the same house for a long time to make ends meet. So their relationship was their dynamic was really interesting. And the romance between Bex and Skottie was just like super cute. I love that in my contemporary romances. Like, if I'm gonna read a contemporary romance, I'm not that into angst, okay? I want it to be sweet. So it definitely fit the bill. And then I love Jen Wilde's writing style. I think this is my second book I've read by her. She writes very conversationally, dialogue feels super realistic, and it just really works with the kind of plots and content that she's writing. My cons for this book are that the villain of the story, the head writer, he was so over the top, like dramatically evil. It felt almost comical, like unrealistically so, and like the final conflict and resolution felt really contrived. Again, like just unrealistic. And of course it's a happy ending kind of story, but the happy ending was like maybe a little too wish fulfillment-y, if that makes sense. I ended up giving this 4 stars though because I really enjoyed it. Book 3 was Switchback by Danika Stone. This was really anticipated for me because the main character is aromantic and asexual. It's a young adult, like contemporary adventure story. Another one I got from my library, read a physical copy. It follows Ash and Vale, who are friends in high school, and for their like high school's PE class, they have to do this weekend or overnight hiking trip in the mountains in Canada, very cold, and unexpectedly they get left behind from their group, and then an unexpected storm comes through, so they have no way of finding them. So it's a survival story about Ash and Vale trying to make it through the night. Pros for this book. It was really exciting to read because, I mean, they're trying to survive in the woods. It's Canada. There are, what is there in Canada? There's bears. There's moose, which are violent when you cross them, and other such animals, and just trying to find food and shelter and avalanches and like all the shit that could go wrong. So it was just like a page turner wanting to know what's going to happen. I also liked that Ash's aromanticism, asexuality was discussed on page. Like she discussed it with Vale, and then like their friendship dynamic was realistic. They're friends, but they've kind of been growing apart over the last few years, so you kind of see the tension there. And it was also very realistic about the actual abilities of teenagers. So Ash and her family are fairly outdoorsy, so she has a decent grasp of outdoor survival, but obviously her family has always been prepared, and she's always had her family with her. So the way her skills translated from like family campgrounds to actual wilderness was realistic, and Vale was completely incompetent. You know what? I just realized I'm mixing up their names, and Vale is the female character and Ash is the male character. So just like reverse everything I just said. Cons for this book are that the plot and like the adventure storyline definitely took precedence over like any deeper character arcs or character development. There's still some, but there could have been more. I also felt like the adventure storyline got a little repetitive because it's pretty formulaic. Like really bad thing happens, but the book is so long, you know, like, so at some point, you know, they're gonna make it through these little things in the beginning, so it kind of lessened that excitement. I ended up giving this 3 stars. Pretty good, kind of disappointed. Book 4 was, I have this one, Recursion by Blake Crouch. This is an adult sci-fi thriller. It follows, let's see if I can get this plot, like, reasonably summarized. So it follows Helena, who is a scientist, and she is developing this sort of memory treatment. Her mom has Alzheimer's, and she wants to find a way to preserve memories so that people with Alzheimer's and dementia are able to recover them. So, you know, good intentions, Helena. And then we also follow Barry, who is, Helena's story starts in like 2007, I think, and Barry's story is in 2019. And Barry is a cop in New York where people are starting to develop false memories. It's like they wake up one day and they're living their life, but suddenly they have sets of memories that they didn't have before, and is causing a lot of problems because people have depression, they like their past lives more, or they feel like their current life isn't fulfilling like their other life was, so it's just causing havoc. And I'm not going to say anything else because it's just too much. So basically, we're following these 2 characters and seeing how their paths intertwine and what their stories have to do with each other. My pros for this book, super fast-paced, and a lot of like mindfuckery because we're playing with memory and time and how memories affect our current state of being, and it was just like a lot. I thought Helena was an excellent character. Like, her motivations were really realistic, and I'm impressed with the way she was written because I've read some Blake Crouch before where I don't think his women are that well developed, so this is definitely progress for him. Barry as a character was interesting, but there's something interesting about Blake Crouch's characters where his women they have more background. I feel like they have more motivation, but his male characters feel more realistic in their like day-to-day actions. So that's how Barry was. Also, I mean, obviously because we're talking about memory and technology, like the way things develop felt realistic as far as like corporate interests and government involvement and stuff like that. My cons for this book are, I kind of already mentioned the characterization, but also there's like a major emotional motivator for Barry in the first half to 3/4 of this book that's just sort of dropped towards the end and then picked up again at the very last second. I thought it was just weird. And if you've read this, you probably know what I'm talking about if you noticed it. So that is another con. I ended up giving this 4 stars though, just because it was such like a good, like exciting read. Next is The Abyss Surrounds Us by Emily Skrutskie. This is a young adult sci-fi. I read this as a physical book for my library. It follows Cass, who is, alright, so let's start at the world setup. So this is set in the near future after some like climate disasters where people have sort of taken to the seas to live. There are like large structures and piracy, like actual ocean piracy, is much more common as a way to survive. So scientists have developed these huge sea monsters to protect ships. They sort of raise the sea monsters, train them, bond them to a ship so that when they're out in the ocean, the sea monster will protect them from pirates. So our main character, Cass, is the child of 2 of these scientist trainers, and she herself is becoming a trainer, and we follow her on her first day doing her first actual mission. It's supposed to be really easy, it's a cruise line, but shit goes wrong. So Cass's ship is overtaken by pirates, and she is kidnapped, and it turns out that this pirate ship somehow has one of these baby monsters, and they force her to train this monster to protect their ship and attack other ships. We also have a love interest, Swift, a female-female relationship here. So Swift is on the pirate ship, and she has a complicated background for how she got to be there. And this book is packed with like morally gray, complicated motivation characters, which is something I loved about it. So let's move on to the pros then, since I just threw that in there. This is a super interesting world. There's sort of like a monster trainer bonding to the trainers, and I loved that. Emily Skrutskie also did a great job working in like the themes of how poverty and crime are connected and really can't be separated from each other. Also, this book has lesbians, so that's cool. My cons for this book are that the main villain, the like head pirate of this pirate ship, felt a little flat to me. I felt like her character could have been something more. Like some of her dialogue felt really cheesy, and the way she spoke to like her underlings, I don't know. It's just too much. But I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I would recommend it. Book 6 I read was Middlewest by Skottie Young. This is I think it's an adult graphic novel. And it was a bind-up of the first, 6 volumes, I think. Another one I got from my library. I read the physical copy. We follow Abel, who is from a small town in the middle of nowhere. He has a volatile, abusive, single parent. And one day, this monster made of wind, this big storm, comes out of nowhere and knows him and starts chasing him down. So he and his little fox friend run away, and they're trying to find someone that can help him get rid of this monster. I don't want to say any more than that because there are some pretty obvious, pretty obvious parallels and metaphors, but they're just so beautifully written. So first pros for these books are this book. The art is gorgeous. I'm going to put the cover over here like I always do, but I'm going to see if I can find some spreads to show you because they're just so pretty. The colors they chose were great. There's some great contrasts between cool and warm colors, between light and dark. I just loved it. The world is surprisingly gritty. Abel is a child. I think he's a preteen, but it doesn't shy away from showing the dark gritty sides of like being alive. And the story is so emotional, and I actually got choked up at the end of this. I've been looking for graphic novels that I enjoy for a long time now. Like, I keep picking them up more regularly, and nothing really sticks with me. Like, I always think they're just okay, or I hate them. That's been my trend so far. But this was amazing. I give it 5 stars. So if you have any recommendations for graphic novels like this, with beautiful art and like subtle fantasy worlds, I would appreciate them. Okay, book 7, Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. This is in, oh, I have this one, TV adaptation cover, which I don't love, but it's fine. It was on sale. This is an adult fantasy. You've probably heard of it because they made an adaptation on Amazon Prime, which was excellent. I actually watched the show first, and then I picked up the book because I liked it so much. So, this book follows an angel and a demon, Crowley and Aziraphale, who are trying to stop the apocalypse, basically. In addition to Crowley and Aziraphale, we also have Adam, who is the Antichrist, and his group of friends. And then we also have, I think his name was Newt, and I cannot remember the witch's name. There are too many people in this book, like I could not remember all of their names. It's kind of hard to forget Crowley and Aziraphale, though. So, pros for this book is that it is fucking hilarious. Like, the humor is it's very British humor. It's very subtle and dry and irreverent because, like, there's a lot of biblical references in here. The plotting and the storytelling is, like, masterful. I mean, Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman is quite a duo, so that's to be expected. And all of the characters are so unique. I love them all. So my only cons for this book are that, and I think it's because I watched the show first. In the show, I am way more attached to Crowley and Aziraphale because it's Michael Sheen and David Tennant, and I love both of them, and they play these characters so well. But I did prefer reading about Adam, the Antichrist, and his group of friends. Oh, Agnes, that's the name of the witch. Anyways, so I preferred all of the other characters more in the book, but I liked Crowley and Aziraphale more in the show. So I really just think that watching it first affected my enjoyment. I ended up giving this 4 stars, though. Really good. Book 8. So I participated in the Reading Rush in July, and one of the challenges was to read a book and then watch the adaptation. And I have this book that I bought on sale, thank God, and I've had it for a long time. So I was like, this is perfect. I'll just read this for this challenge. It's pretty short. It won't take me long. And then I'll watch the movie. And that is Beastly by Alex Flinn. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling about a teenage boy who is stupidly privileged. He's super attractive. I mean, literally that's it. He's super attractive. That's the only thing he has going for him. He's not that intelligent. He doesn't do well in school. His dad is an asshole. He's like a newscaster, his dad. And in his school, there's like a new student that appears, and he is super mean to her because she's ugly. And she curses him to look like a beast for 2 years, I think, unless he can get someone to fall in love with him and kiss him. I have no pros for this book. I read it in less than a day. Is that a pro? It gives me a lot of things to complain about. Is that a pro? My cons for this book are literally everything. Kyle, who is the main beast character, is the worst. Like, there is nothing good about him. And, like, the author tries to give some, like, background for his character for how much of a dick his dad is, but his dad is neglectful, like, emotionally neglectful, and literally only cares about Kyle because he is gonna carry on the good looks in his family. Just like this, what an unrealistic father figure. Even bad parents are more complex than that, you know? So, in addition to Kyle being the worst, our love interest, Linda, who goes by Lindy, I don't know why, because it's not any shorter than Linda, it's not a fucking nickname. Just everything, well, you know when you hate a book, like, even the inoffensive things about it become annoying? That's how I feel about this book. So Lindy is not a person. She is a cardboard cutout of female. Like, she's described, here's a side note. You know, I'm gonna get into that later. She's described as plain and mousy and generally unattractive, not remarkable in any way. And really, that's her entire personality. Her entire personality is to be boring. Nothing else interesting happens to her. Her father is actually physically abusive and is a drug addict and is constantly getting in trouble with other people and getting her in trouble and is, I believe, physically abusive. I can't recall exactly. But her reactions to her situation like, everything she did was not a real thing. She would just be like, oh, it's sad that my dad is this way. Oh, I have to protect my dad. But, like, where are your motivations? Why do you feel that way? Also, this book was written in 2007, and the number of times he talks about outdated social media was just too much. MySpace talks about MySpace. 2007? I feel like Facebook was already around in 2007. Also, there's these, like, dumb sections where, like, he finds this online support group for other people that have been turned into creatures by witches. They were dumb. Really dumb. We have the typical Beauty and the Beast problem where he basically kidnaps the female love interest, and somehow it's chill, and somehow she falls in love with him, even though he is a boring as shit character whose only character development is going from I'm gonna be mean to ugly people to ugly people aren't that bad. Like, what the fuck? It's just it boggles the mind. Like, I feel like the lesson in a book like this should be looks aren't really that relevant and what's inside matters, but instead the character development is what I just said. He's like, plain people are okay if you like them. It's just fucking weird. Just weird. Also, if the, like, boring as shit beginning and middle and super predictable plot wasn't bad enough, at the end we get both racist and ableist. It's just like 2007. What the fuck was going on? Okay, and now for the adaptation. Because in the book, when the witch turns him into a beast, he is truly beast-like. He is covered in hair, his jaw is distorted, he has, I'm pretty sure he's horns, he has claws. But in the movie, they just did this to him, they just did that to him. Because if he's really ugly, who would want to watch the movie? Also, our plain, boring, mousy, unattractive character is fucking Vanessa Hudgens. Like, what? Who, if Vanessa Hudgens is plain and unattractive, there's no hope for anyone. So, in conclusion, the movie just perpetuated the same problems that the author poorly tried to address in the book. I give this 1 star. If I could have given it 0 stars, I would have. I actively steer you away from this book. I cannot believe anyone in 2007 read this and was like, yeah, this would be a good movie. If you've read this book and you want to bitch about it with me, please do. Because it's so old that no one on BookTube or BookTwitter has read it. Like, everyone on there is like, 19, and this book is too old. So, next, on to more positive notes. Book 9 was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. This is book 2 in the Wayward Children's series. It's a novella. I still don't know if it's technically adult or young adult. It's shelved in my library's adult section. It follows 2 characters that we meet in the first book, Jacqueline and Jillian, and it follows them from when they're young and at home and into their fantasy world. So basically their backstory. Prose are like same as the first novella. It was like super atmospheric. Seanan McGuire does those like fairy tale vibes really well. In the first book, I didn't really care about Jack and Jill. Like, I was kind of annoyed every time they showed up. So surprisingly, their story was really interesting. And I especially loved like the background of them living at home with their parents and how they ended up the way with the personalities that they have because of the way their parents treated them. So I thought that was really interesting. My cons are the same as always with novellas. It felt like, it just always feels like bits of the story are missing. Or like it's just the beginning of the story, and I suppose Jack and Jill will be back later. At least I think they will. Oh yeah, I think she just announced the 5th book in the series is going to be more about Jack and Jill. Oh, also, there's a female-female relationship in this one between Jack, someone in this fantasy world. It's not super developed. I mean, again, it's a novella, but it was sweet. Book 10 was Black Wings Beating by Alex London. This is young adult fantasy. Obviously, I own this one. It follows. Okay, it's set in a world, like a fantasy world, where falconing is a very common thing. Birds are like a commodity, a major commodity. People race birds, people fight birds. Birds are like spotters and trackers and shit. So they're always being captured and trained and sold. Our main characters are twins, Bryson and Kylie. Bryson wants to be a falcon trainer. He wants to be a fighter in these battle pits so he can battle other people with falcons, and apparently you make a lot of money that way, and if you can train falcons you make even more money because you can train them for other people. Kylie kind of hates birds, it seemed like. She's trying to get her and Bryson to pay off the debt they owe to these people so that they can get the fuck out of their town and just go travel together. Bryson and Kylie's family life is not great. Their dad recently died, but even before he died, he was physically abusive to Bryson and emotionally manipulative to Kylie, and their mother is like emotionally absent. She is super religious and in a way that takes up all of her energy and time. So Bryson and Kylie kind of take care of her. We also have Bryson's love interest, Damien. So Bryson is gay, and something I liked about this book is that it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not really addressed as anything different from being straight, so that's cool. We also have Neil, who is a friend of Kylie and Bryson's, kind of has a crush on Kylie, but Kylie, early on in the story, says that she has no interest in romantic or sexual relationships, basically. And I think in the second book, that's more concrete. I think the author said that it's on page in book 2. It's alluded to in this book, though. And then we have Joan, who they meet later on in the story. So, basically, that's the characters in our world. But the plot follows Bryson, because Damien has gotten into debt with some powerful people in the city that they live in, and Bryson makes a deal with this guy to keep Damien safe if he can capture a ghost eagle, which is like this big, scary eagle that no one can ever capture and is like mystical and some shit. So Bryson agrees for some reason to capture this ghost eagle to keep Damien safe, and Kylie is incapable of letting him do anything on his own, so she follows him. Neil follows her because he wants her pants, and they meet Joan later on their journey. So pros for this book. I honestly enjoyed reading this. Like, I enjoyed the writing style. There's pretty consistent action going on here, so I never got bored. I read the first 150 pages in one sitting. I was constantly asking the characters in my mind, like, what the fuck are you doing? Why would you do this? Why would you agree to this? Why are you making these decisions? But all of the terrible decisions that they made were consistent with their characters. When I have a problem with characters making dumb decisions, it's because our characters are framed in a way that they're supposed to be better than other people. So when you have a character that's framed in a way that they're smart and strong and forward-thinking and strategic, and then they do some dumb shit, you're like, that doesn't make any sense for their character. All of these characters are dumb as shit. So it makes sense that they would make dumb fucking decisions. So it didn't really bother me in the way that it bothers me in some other books. Cons for this book. Everyone's dumb. Everyone is dumb. They have like very obvious they're flawed characters, and I think that's kind of a pro and a con. It depends on the author's intention. If he intended these characters to be flawed, I think it works. If we're supposed to think these characters are good, he failed. I also had a problem with the way animals are treated in this book, just because, I don't know, like in an epic fantasy world, in an adult book, I feel like you can get away with negative behavior more easily because the themes are more complex and there's a lot of subtleties going on that just don't work as well in a young adult book. And especially in this book, I don't think it's being addressed very well, and the way the story is set up, I don't think it can be addressed in the future. So these birds are literally captured and trained, and they like manipulate them into behaving well, using food and other tactics. And it's very clear throughout the book that the birds don't really give a shit about their owners, and the owners may give a shit about them, but there's no bond between them. There's no, reciprocated bond. So there's a secondary bad guy in this book, which is a whole group of people that are super religious and think that man and birds should not interact at all. And then there's like a subset of those people that just think man should not control the birds. And I found myself consistently agreeing with this subset of people that we're supposed to think are crazy. Like, they would be like, man should not control nature. And I'm like, yes, I agree. So that was just weird. And I'm probably going to pick up the second book. I gave this 3 stars. And typically at 3 stars, I wouldn't pick up a second book, but I feel like I will, just to see where complexities of this book are going. Like, will that be addressed? I hope so, but we'll see. Okay, that's everything I read in July. Please let me know if you read any of these, especially Black Wings Beating, because I want to talk about my problems and the things I liked. I post book-related videos every Wednesday, so subscribe if you want to see more. You can find me on Twitter at Kelsey Reads or Goodreads at Kelsey Lynn Reads if you want to keep talking. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.